Insect lover of the sun, joy of thy dominion, sailor through the atmosphere, swimmer through the waves of air. This is a portion of one of many poems written by Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was not only an American poet, but also an essayist and lecturer. Shaped by the course of his life, his poetry can ultimately relate to anyone, even you. Here's why you should know about him. Emerson's story began in 1803 when he was born in Boston, Massachusetts. Yes, a local patriot. Just a few years after Emerson's birth, Boston would face a conflict between its older conservative views and newer radical movements. Ralph Waldo Emerson, or Waldo as he preferred, grew up during the development of these conflicting ideas. At the young age of 14, he went off to Harvard to learn. Yes, it may seem from this that he was a genius child. However, he graduated as the exact middle of his class. He then later attended Harvard Divinity School, religious school, and then served briefly as a pastor at Boston's Second Church. It may seem from this that Emerson became strictly devoted to religion, but don't be fooled. A series of events soon changed the way that he viewed religion, and life in general. Emerson had several upsetting experiences. First, his brother Edward became the victim of tuberculosis. But the sun did rise again, and in 1829 Emerson married Ellen Tucker. Unfortunately, her life too was soon claimed by tuberculosis. Her death left a profound impact on Emerson, and he began to disagree with the church's methods and views. After a few years, Emerson married his second wife, Lydia Jackson. But, yet again, tragedy struck Emerson with the death of his 5-year-old son, Waldo. All these unfortunate events led to the writing of poems like Threnody, which showed the grief Emerson felt at losing a loved one. I had the right few days ago, thy steps to watch, thy place to know. How have I forfeited the right? Hast thou forgotten me in new delight? I hearken for thy household cheer. Shouldn't we all know about a man who wrote such true, meaningful words? On September 8, 1836, Emerson, also known as the Sage of Concord, met with several individuals to plan regular meetings of a strongly opinionated group. This was the beginning of the Transcendental Club, which later included prominent figures like Henry David Thoreau and Margaret Fuller. The next day, Emerson's famous essay, Nature, was published, which is considered to be the defining text of transcendentalism. By this point, you're probably wondering what transcendentalism is. Please, let me enlighten you. In essence, transcendentalism states that conformity and organized religion are unfavorable. It is also the main reason to study Ralph Waldo Emerson, since his poems provide an insight to this important 19th century movement. His poems were also largely responsible for this movement. At its peak during the 1830s, transcendentalism was almost like a revival of British Romanticism, with its emphasis on individuality and spirituality through nature. In fact, Emerson viewed nature as the link between the individual and the divine. The rounded world is fair to see, 9 times folded in mystery, though baffled seers cannot impart the secret of its laboring heart. This poem is almost a perfect summary of transcendentalism. Another view Emerson presented was his dislike for conformity. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Studying Emerson would allow us to discuss the pros and cons of conformity. For example, do you think it's worth going to school or not? Surprisingly, Emerson would have said that school is not as useful as experience. He wrote, "Books are for the scholar's idle times," and "Only so much do I know as I have lived." The most important point Emerson emphasized was getting to know the world around you. According to him, everything was divine. This is one of the most noticeable themes in Emerson's poetry. Hast thou named all the birds without a gun? Loved the wood rose and left it on its stalk? Unarmed, face danger with a heart of trust? Doesn't that make you wonder? Studying Emerson's poetry might just boost your awareness for the world around you. Also, his poetry style is seemingly simple, with short lines and casual rhyming patterns. However, reading between the lines will help uncover the questions and answers hidden within the poem. Believe it or not, the philosophical views Emerson shows through his poetry are highly quoted in today's time.
Sayings such as, "So far as a man thinks, he is free," or "A great man is always willing to be little," often pop up on coffee mugs or motivational posters. Studying Emerson's poetry would help us understand where these sayings come from. Also, by analyzing his poems, we would gain insight into a wide variety of topics, from nature and self-realization to traditionalism and conformity. And by simply analyzing his poems, we would understand some of the tensions of 19th century America. But for now, I leave you with this final quote from Emerson. "Adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience."